There are a number of things that business leaders and business owners need to know about cyber liability insurance. But first, where do you start? Well, we generally start with risk, internal or external. Internal risk is if you were to be breached and ransomware to have taken over your whole organization, you can't function, you can't make money, you still have overhead, so you still have employees to pay. What is that worth? Generally speaking, at least 3, 4, 5 days of downtime, if not maybe more, before you can get all your data restored from a backup and get up to a functional state again. So if you took your monthly average revenue, divide that by your business days that you actually worked, then you would have about a number that would cost per day to run your business. And that's, again, overhead and revenue that you make. If you multiply that out by 3, 4, 5 days, that's a bare minimum. That's the minimum coverage you need from your cyber liability insurance to help you from an internal perspective. On the external side of the coin, what we're looking at there is if your data was breached and data was stolen and that information went out to the world, what is that cost? What is that worth to your organization? And it's a much broader number, but you need to make sure that you have that coverage, not only from a reputational perspective, but also to make sure that you have the ability to cover whatever expenses it's going to cost you when you are sued by the client's data that you allowed to leave your organization, as well as being able to cover them from whether it's credit monitoring, dark web monitoring, and things of that nature. So you have internal cost, you have external cost that you're looking to cyber liability cover that, so that obviously that doesn't come from your capital expenses. Another thing that you need to be aware of is that not all insurance companies know how to sell cyber. It's very common for a business leader or business owner to go to the company that they're getting their general liability from and just say, hey, I need a cyber rider policy, or I need a cyber policy. They throw something on there and you think you're covered because your insurance agent says, yes, you have cyber liability insurance. But what you may not know, or what you may not pay attention to, is just how good that insurance is. And so when we look at the growth of cyber liability insurance over the last, let's say, 4 years, 4 years ago, you could have gotten a cyber liability policy and not even created any sort of documentation from an application perspective to validate what you are or are not doing from a cyber risk perspective or security perspective. Now, applications are even a dozen pages, if not more. They're really hard to understand for most business owners. They're really hard to really validate whether they are doing something or not. And that's why it's really important to have some sort of IT relationship, whether it's an internal organization staff member that's in IT or your IT department, or whether it's having someone like an MSP who is helping you get through or muddle through those applications to ensure that you're actually doing the things that are on the application. It's really important to make sure that you actually do the questions that are on the application. In the world of compliance, let's say Department of Defense, 80171 is a required compliance model that you must meet. When you have some sort of control that you must meet, it must be in place. From a cyber liability insurance perspective, that application is a questionnaire. It really is an application for enforcement. So they're looking for ways to find out how at risk you are as an organization. And if you check no on everything, well, you have a higher likelihood of risk. Thus, they likely will not even offer you a plan. But if you have most of the things, if not hopefully all of them, then your premiums are lower, your sub limits are higher, your actual policy limits are higher, and your actual, like if you had a 2,500 or a $5,000 pay deductible, those will also be lower because you are less risk to the organization. So it's really important to know that when you're going into looking at a cyber liability insurance policy, that you use an agent that knows about cyber liability insurance, and that you also work with either your internal IT team or your MSP to fill out the application, and preferably to make sure you check every box with a yes. If you don't have the ability to, you put an application or put a service or a solution in place to ensure that you can click yes. That will allow you to have the best insurance policy with the lowest deductibles and the lowest premiums. Now, beyond that, really a starting point is around $1 million. Like that's the minimum that you really need to go in order to make sure that you have at least a good policy. Now, with that said, it's really important to recognize that most cyber reliability insurance providers, they're smart and they recognize where risk is. And so, even on $1 million policy, you may have a sublimit that's $50,000 for ransomware or is $10,000 for ransomware. The benefit there is they have less risk and they charge a lower premium. So, it sounds a lot easier to consume because maybe it's $600 or $700. Honestly, I've not seen a good policy under $1,500 and really under $2,000. So, a really good policy, $1 million or more, and then make sure you're getting good sublimits in the areas where you have the most risk. And those are, for example, wire fraud, ransomware, social engineering, telecommunication fraud, things of that nature. Where the big risks are, those limits will be greatly reduced, especially if you don't have the application filled out as well as you possibly can. The other thing that you need to worry about is the reputational repair. So if you were to have a breach, what happens to your reputation? Do people really want to do business with you or do they not want to do business with you? And so it's important to also have coverage for reputational repair when it comes to your cyber liability insurance so that you don't have to pull that out of capital to try to recover your name. It's your business and it should mean everything to you. And thus, you want to make sure that you are actually getting some sort of reputational repair if there were a breach. But honestly, all of these things are really important when it comes to cyber liability insurance. But instead of using that as your fallback, you should be using solutions and security methodologies to minimize to the greatest amount possible the likelihood that you will have a risk. If you go that route, your insurance will be better, your premiums will be better, and the likelihood that you ever have an event is going to be far smaller than if you just kind of go at a policy with whatever you get, you get. Make sure that you're communicating with your insurance provider. Make sure you're asking about your limits. Make sure you are asking about your sublimits, especially around the ones I told you, which were ransomware, social engineering, telecommunication fraud, wire transfer fraud, and reputational harm. Those are really, really big. So it's very important to make sure you have appropriate coverage for that.